My name is Regina Neville, and I'm the chair of the board. This evening's meeting is being live streamed on the District 287 YouTube channel. The meeting is also being recorded, and a link to the recording will be posted on the district's school board section of the website. The public is always invited and welcome to share their comments with the board. Please review the virtual meeting request form on the school district website in the school board section. Completed forms received by 4:30 p.m. on the day of the board meeting will be read at the beginning of the meeting. If board members wish to share a question or comment, I ask that they use the raised hand link on the board book Premier screen. And as this is a virtual meeting, we will continue to take all votes by roll call. So at this point, I would like to invite board member Michelle Kuntz to read the District 287 mission. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The mission of Intermediate District 287 is to be the premier provider of innovative, specialized services to ensure that each member district can meet the unique learning needs of its students.
Thank you. And at this time, I would like to have board member introductions. I invite board members to unmute their microphones. And Crystal, would you please ask each board member to introduce themselves and the district they represent?
We will, as always, go in alphabetical order, beginning with Adams.
Steve Adams, Hopkins School District.
And I am Crystal Brackey from Richfield Public Schools. Casey.
Ann Casey, proudly representing St. Louis Park Public Schools.
Keene.
Hi, everyone. Andrea Keene, Wayzata Schools.
Dallas.
Hello, everyone. Ruthie Dallas from Brooklyn Center Community Schools, number 286.
Douglas.
Heather Douglas, Osseo Area Schools, District 279.
Coons.
Hi, Michelle Kuntz for Orono Schools.
Marty.
Good evening. I'm Heidi Marty representing West Tonka Schools.
Neville.
Hi, I'm Regina Neville representing Edina Public Schools, District 273.
Sant.
Hello, my name is Sam Sant, and I'm representing Robbinsdale 281.
And Seidel.
Adam Seidel, representing Eden Prairie District 272.
Thank you very much. We have 100% attendance this evening. I'm now going to introduce staff members who are in attendance with us this evening. Tanya Allen, Michelle Axel, Ann Becker, Melissa Bratting, Sean Garvey, Radius Guess, May Hawkins, Kim Helgeson, Superintendent Sandy Lewandowski, Elizabeth Lodge Rogers, Ben McGrath, Chad Maxa, Juanine Mgini, Dina Sage, John Voss, and Gloria Wilder. Are there any staff members in attendance I have accidentally missed? Well, welcome everyone. Glad to have you here. I'm going to walk through this evening's agenda. We have quite a few items this evening. We'll have our consent agenda followed by a share the success and recognition with an introduction of our new senior manager of mental health. Our superintendent's report includes an update on the 287 learning plan. There's an instructional report regarding the world's best workforce, which is an action item. Our business services and labor relations report includes a presentation of the unaudited financial report for fiscal year 2020. This is also an action item. This will be followed by a human resources report regarding the Gallagher study that we have discussed in past board meetings. This is our classification and compensation study, which is brought before us this evening as an action item. Board business includes policy review and revision with a first read of Title IX policy updates, and we'll conclude this evening with a board chair report. I want to point out just some updated language in the description for the officer election process. An earlier edition of board book referred in the description to a new slate of officers. In fact, what we will be doing is approving the nominating committee to prepare a slate of officers to be approved on January 14th of 2021. And we'll wrap up with an AMSD report and once around the table. Are there any additions to the agenda? Hearing none, I move to accept the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Sam Sant?
Yes.
Is that correct? Yes, excellent. Thanks so much. Crystal, would you please call the roll for approval of the agenda?
Crystal's computer rebooted suddenly, so she's offline right this second.
Okay. So I tell you, I can call the roll, or Andrea, I have a list in front of me, or Andrea, if you would like to do that, you can call the roll.
I do not have a list in front of me, so
It
go
looks like
ahead.
Andrea.
Oh.
I'll go ahead and call the roll for approval of the agenda. Adams,
Yes.
thank you. Crystal, are you back on? We'll come back to Crystal. Casey,
Aye.
and thank you.
Aye.
Keen,
Yes.
Dallas, Douglas,
Aye.
Ruthie, or sorry, no, Heather, got Ruthie and Heather, thank you. Coons,
Aye.
Marty,
Aye.
Neville, I vote aye. Sant,
Yes.
Seidel,
Yes.
thank you. And Crystal, are you back on?
She is not yet.
We do have, that's all right. We do have a majority vote. So understanding the technical difficulties, we have a majority vote. So we will take that as approval of the agenda and move forward. And I know Crystal will rejoin as soon as she's able to. Our next item on the agenda, audience opportunity to speak. Juanine, is there anyone who would like to address the board this evening?
No, Madam.
Thank you very much. We'll move on with approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items anyone would like to have removed from the consent agenda for separate consideration? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
So moved, Andrea Keen.
Second.
Thank
Ann
you,
Casey.
Andrea. Is there a second? Seconded by Ann Casey. And thank you. I don't see Crystal back on yet. Is that correct?
It's correct.
So I'm going to continue and I'm going to call the roll again for approval of the consent agenda. I invite board members to please unmute their mics. Adams,
Aye.
Brackey, and I understand we'll wait for Crystal. Casey,
Aye.
Keen,
Yes.
Dallas,
Yes.
Douglas,
Aye.
Coons,
Aye.
Marty,
Aye.
Neville, I vote aye. Sant,
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Thank you. And we do have majority approval of the consent agenda. And I recognize Crystal will, again, she'll join us as soon as she's able to. The next item on our agenda is number 5, share the success and recognition. It's my pleasure to welcome Tonya Allen to make our introduction.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. I just want to introduce you to our new Senior Manager of Mental Health, Dina Sage. Dina comes to us most recently from private practice, and prior to that, she was a school social worker in Orono Public Schools. And so we're excited to have her join us to bring expertise in helping us with our STOP grant, our Project Aware, and some other initiatives that we have in the area of mental health. So I will turn it over to Dina just to say a couple of additional words about herself and what she brings to our district. So welcome, Dina.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. Thanks. It's kind of awkward joining a team at this time and in with everything going on with being virtual and not really getting out to sites and things, but it's been really great getting to know people and meeting them virtually. Like Tanya said, I've come from private practice. I was doing some nature-based and equine assisted psychotherapy with kids and families out in Minnetrista. I wasn't really looking for a job, but when this position had become available, I couldn't turn it down and not apply. So I decided to apply, and the more further along I got in the interview process, the more I decided I really wanted this job. And so it was just a really great opportunity that, that came in front of me, and I'm really excited to learn and to grow. I was a school social worker previously before I was in private practice for Orono, and that was for about 8 years. And I did some administrative duties too, because there's a little bit of crossover there with them being such a small district. So, but yeah, I'm excited to learn and grow. And yeah, I'm just glad that you guys gave me a chance to introduce myself and let me know if there's any questions or if I can help support any of your roles at all. Be happy to.
Well, thank you, Dina. Welcome. It's excellent to have you here, and we'll be looking forward to meeting you in person when that's possible. But
yes,
we really appreciate you joining us virtually, because the work is continuing.
Yes.
And we're really grateful to have you on board.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or comments for Dina? That's okay. Welcome. We're really glad that you're here.
Thank you.
And applause.
Thank
Applause and
thank you. Thank you so much.
you're welcome. All right. Next up on our agenda. Oh, good. Glad to have you here. Next is our superintendent's report. We'll have an update on the learning plan, and I'd like to welcome Elizabeth Lodge Rogers.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Lewandowski, and I believe that Juanina is going to share her screen so that with the presentation, my name's Elizabeth Lodge Rogers, and I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Programs and Services. And we're here tonight just to give you an update on where we are with our learning model. Go ahead, Juanine. I hope to kind of tell you where we are, what the current model is that we're operating in, give you a couple bits on special education and some due process considerations, and finally provide you with a snapshot of how many students are in our buildings and what we're seeing in terms of the incidence of COVID in our school sites and programs. We'll wrap up with an opportunity for questions and answers, and I'm going to leverage all my wonderful colleagues to help me out when we get to that point, because we're a team here and we work together, and we all have a lot of good information. So thank you. Thinking about where we are currently, and go ahead, Juanine, you may advance. Our district learning model, if you'll recall, we started out in September in step 0, a connected learning experience. And then we moved pretty deliberately and systematically, I think September 28th, through steps 1, 2, and 3, which put us in the position of serving 50% of the students approximately 2 days a week in a hybrid model. We, at this point, have returned to step 0, and you probably have seen this infographic of ours, so I won't spend time on that, but move on to what does this look like now. So thank you, Juanine. In step 0, we took what we learned in our first round of connected learning earlier this fall, and we have an enhanced version, if you will. Beginning December, we began in this December 2nd, and we anticipate at least remaining in this enhanced connected learning model through the 15th, hoping that we might be able to move forward January 19th, but recognizing that this is a changing situation. We are always reevaluating and conferring, looking at our case data, discussing with our stakeholders. Sandy, I know, is meeting tomorrow with the regional resource group that supports districts. And so we look at many variables as we make those decisions. What we do commit to is that no later than January 5th, we will communicate to all our stakeholders, families, staff, member districts, what that's going to look like on January 19th. Part of what we did as we transitioned back into connected learning was leverage the opportunity for some additional professional learning days. And so November 30th and December 1st were district professional learning days. The focus was to provide our staff with some self-directed time and preparation time, teams to work together and get ready for this transition, as well as for sites to come together. And finally, our wonderful professional learning team under Dr. John Voss's direction provided a number of sessions, both synchronous and asynchronous professional learning district-wide. And we actually had close to 1,000 enrollees or sessions attended across all our staff. So that's kind of how we started this. And go ahead, Juanine, thank you. With our improved or our enhanced model, all students have had the option to elect to come in for 1 day in person per week. This isn't, it distinguishes itself from the hybrid, which was a set schedule. Kids came in and followed that schedule, and they were here 2 days a week. This 1 day is really targeted and focused based on student needs, based on where they are in terms of their progress. What do they need? And all this happened in combination and conversation with families. So we offered this option. It began this week on Monday the 7th, with students beginning to come in to our sites in smaller numbers. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the special ed programming. We've also continued to leverage our mental health related services and supports, as well as co-located providers to assure that our students have access to those supports during this time. And our mental health folks are working on collecting data through a mental health screener and a process for that, so that we're doing our best not to overlook any students who may be in families that may be experiencing crises at this point in time. Finally, our Check and Connect program, which is an evidence-based strategy for re-engaging students and responding to students who may have attendance issues, is up and started. We were able to provide training for educational assistants in this very supportive and tailored, individualized approach to reconnecting frequently with students. So that's just beginning and taking off as our other mentorship opportunities. So that's kind of the enhanced version of connected learning. We took what we learned, tried to beef it up, enhance some things. And again, students have started coming into our schools this week, Monday through Thursday, actually. Thank you, Juanine. So I'll move on. There's a few implications for special education and due process. In our planning back in August, late August and into the first week of September, our teams connected with families and met to review students' individual education plans and develop collaboratively a contingency learning plan. And what the contingency learning plan does is it communicates, we hope clearly, what service delivery is going to look like in each of the 3 phases of service delivery, whether we're in our connected learning or distance, in a hybrid mode, and then in person. And certainly the IEP itself stands for that opportunity when we're all back and school's happening in a more routine way. But meanwhile, the connected learning plan just provides another way to describe what is actually happening educationally for each child. And it's important to note that our connected learning plan reflects service delivery that's kind of the minimum, what we will certainly be providing as it relates to those specific areas or modes of the CLP tied to the student's individual plan. Thank you, Juanine. So we hope that by offering connected learning in this, and by providing this enhanced version of it with an additional day of in-person services, targeted, focused, tailored to what the students, those individual students need, we can accomplish a number of things. First, we know our students do best in person. We know that that relationships are critical to the success and the progress our students make. So we wanted to continue, despite where we are in terms of case rates and this global pandemic, to keep some in-person opportunities. We partnered with our families to develop what would be our focus for that one day in person. And we're communicating that with families. And finally, to be honest, we wanted to assure that the students we serve on your behalf are having similar opportunities for some in-person service delivery, commensurate with which a number of you all, our member districts, are providing to their special education students. So it was an attempt to be able to connect, to keep that connection going, to hone in and focus. And we really have a lot of support and planning and structures around monitoring student engagement, following up, re-engaging, working with students, family, teams working together, and data collection to assure us that we have a good handle on the progress students are making. And for us, that's critical. It's every student's right to have access to a free and appropriate public education. In special education, we have an IEP, individualized plan that we're following. For us, we also have that added layer of the CLP to further define. And we want to make sure we know this period of time is rough, it's tough, it's hard on students, it's hard on families, and frankly, it's hard on staff, and all of us are struggling living in this new world of ours, of a global pandemic. But we want to assure that we know where kids are, we know where the progress is, and we can respond to that in order to assure that we're meeting our obligations as far as advocating for those students' access. And I always say, the staff hear me say this all the time, and the leaders hear me say, our highest form of advocacy for our students from a school side is assuring that due process is met. That's how we best advocate for students. So we have a very intentional focus. Melissa Broading, our Director of Special Education, has really put a lot of time and energy along with our team and our leaders and our staff to work through this. Next slide, please, Juanine. One area that we're looking at and considering how we best implement the guidance that MD gave us initially early fall, but there was a lot of conversation and a lot of clarification. But they did provide guidance that school districts could provide in-person, in-home services through contracted or later clarified by having staff go into homes or in-school services beyond perhaps what the learning plan was articulating, particularly at these periods of time in what was termed distance learning. So we've really been reviewing that, and the focus is primarily on our students that IEP teams working alongside with member district reps and families have determined that during the school day, that student needs additional one-to-one, or in some cases, two-to-one support. So how do we assure that a student who needs that level of support is able to access their educational program, whether in person, hybrid, or connected learning? So that was that was the guidance given us to MDE that there should be a way to do that. We're working through that and seeing what opportunities we can leverage to support families. Our commitment is that we're going to do that systematically, starting by taking a look at all the students that have as a part of their plan one-to-one supports or two-to-one supports. Thank you, Juanine. So I'm going to take just a deep breath there and then just give you a snapshot of how many students are coming now that we're in this new phase or step. I think this slide shows you the distribution of actually the number of students coming into our schools on any given day of the week, Monday through Thursday. The next slide, and I'll let Juanine go ahead and advance to that, shows us percentage-wise. And what we see if we look at the last column there is that about, well, right at 48% of our students have and families have elected to just stay completely connected learning and are not, have not chosen to access that one day in person. So conversely, about 52% of the students are coming in for one day of in-person services. And that's spread out across the days, the 4 days during the week. There was a lot of conversation. We talked with families, had to, of course, work with all our transportation directors and partners in our member districts to sort out what day would work best for the students to come in. And by doing this, we've been able to reduce the number of adults, staff in buildings, as well as students, decreasing, as my colleague Jake says in health and safety, the viral load. So that was our intent. So that's started this week, went pretty smoothly. A few usual transportation, some issues like that, but we always have those and we're smoothing those out. Thank you, Juanine. Our next slide shares just a little bit of where we are in terms of the incidence of COVID rates. And on our webpage every Friday, we update this information, and it's actually broken down by schools and program sites. As of last Friday, last time our website was updated, we had a total of 44 confirmed COVID cases and 5 in the previous 10 days. And I think important also is quarantine. How many staff are in quarantine due to symptoms, exposure, household close contacts, those kinds of things. And we had approximately 35 in quarantine last Friday. And that number, we have seen a slowdown in positive cases as well in school, since we have fewer students and continue to have staff that are letting us know what their status is. But we feel good about the work that our health and safety team has done, our school nurses, our facilities team, our purchasing, because we feel pretty good about the amount of PPE, personal protective equipment, we've been able to leverage, as well as our protocols, and folks really practicing and working with that. And our staff have been just tremendous, as have families, in helping our students with maintaining those health and safety protocols as to the best that they can, and the extent that they're able to, given whatever circumstances. All right, thank you, Juanine. So in terms of next steps, I said before, and I'll say it again, we continue to evaluate. This is new territory for all of us, as I know Superintendent Lewandowski has said a number of times. And so we have a number of variables that we look at. We look at case rate data. We look at incidences in our schools and programs. We look at staffing and staff out. And we also rely heavily on the regional resource group as they meet with Sandy and with Jake, and help inform our decision making. We also continue to engage all our stakeholders, internal, in terms of our district-wide planning committee with representation from our different employee groups and our leaders, and then in conversations with our colleagues in the member districts. So we'll update you by January 5th in terms of what our next steps are, but that's kind of what things look like right now. And at this point, I will be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for covering several different points with your presentation. I would invite the board to ask any questions or share comments. I know that first up we have Crystal Brecky. So Crystal, go ahead, please.
Hi, thanks, Elizabeth. My question is just really wondering how we're thinking about the 48%, excuse me, of students who are not coming in for that 1 day a week for a wide variety of reasons, I imagine. And what we're doing to ensure that those students are not further disadvantaged because they are not able or do not feel comfortable coming in comparison to the 52% of students and their families who do.
Yeah, well, part of what we have in place, and certainly we've been working hard on doing a lot of home visits, meaning going out and connecting with families and students in the community. A lot of personal contact, even though you may not be in person, there is someone connecting directly with families. For students that we are, we definitely, I think many of us share this as we talk among colleagues across the metro and the state. You know, we do have a portion of students that aren't engaging and that we continue to reach out and work together with on. It is a constant communication game, and not a game, a serious business of communicating. Our educational assistants are leveraged as well to be kind of virtually side by side with students during synchronous and asynchronous instruction that may be happening. So that's one way we've been able to leverage our educational assistants during this time. So it is a variety of approaches to work on that engagement and monitoring progress. And I think the reality is that we know that there are not the gains we want to see in progress for all of our students. And the reality is that we're already thinking ahead to what's this going to look like. We use that term compensatory, and I'm a little reluctant. That's a due process kind of term where parents can go through a process and teams come together and determine that the student didn't, progress indicates a need for compensatory education. I think the reality is we're going to really have to think long and hard about what our extended school year programming looks like and how we're going to work hard to get our students where they need to be. It's a challenge. Thanks, Crystal.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions or comments? I don't see any additional ones at this point in time, but Elizabeth, thank you to you and to your team, because we recognize that all of the work you're doing needs to continue to evolve and be responsive based on everything that we learn. And that takes a lot of energy, and we really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the chance to talk with you.
We're going to move on to item 7 on the agenda, the instructional report. I'd like to welcome Dr. John Voss for an update on the world's best workforce. This report is an action item. So welcome, John.
Thank you, Chair Neville and board members. Each year, MDE requires the submission of our world's best workforce report and the approval of the plan for the current year. So these two documents have been included for review. Because we operate on behalf of our member districts, the process plays out a little differently than in most districts, though we still set goals and collect the data in the required areas. There are also some anomalies this year with the disruptions we've seen since last March. One aspect of our process is that our school board fulfills the function of a district advisory committee. And then last year and this year, we've also been inviting additional input from students, parents, guardians, and community stakeholders through our community improvement leadership teams, or the continuous improvement learning leadership teams within our sites. They help us guide our school improvement plans for our schools and our programs. Our family engagement efforts have expanded even further this year under the leadership of Tanya Allen and her team, providing more opportunities for family and student involvement in our planning at the school level. The goals that are in our plans are consolidated from our school improvement plans, which in turn are informed by the district strategic plan. Because of the high needs of our student populations, the data that informs our results are more directly represented in the key performance indicators that Ben McGrath presented at the last board meeting. Those KPIs drive the school improvement plans developed at each of our sites to focus on the areas that will have the greatest impact for students in their classrooms. So in general, the KPIs are more informative directly for us than some of the broader goal areas in the world's best workforce. That's even more true currently because the spring assessment data collection for last year was disrupted due to COVID-19 and distance learning, to the extent that we're not able to report results for all but one of the goal areas. So you'll see unable to report as the result area in many of those places for the summary for this year. That's how MDE has directed reporting under the circumstances, and is likely the case in many districts this year. For that reason, we'll also carry forward the goal baseline data from last year into the FY21 plan for this year and set similar targets. We do expect that further learning loss from this year's challenges, it will impact those results. And so we're working to address those needs through our coaches and support staff. And then as we plan for next year, we'll also be looking into a number of areas for improvement. So the action item is we ask that you approve the World's Best Workforce Plan for this 2020-2021 school year to meet that state requirement. And we look forward to sharing more specific aspects of this work through our school improvement plans and KPI data in the future. Thank you, and I'll open up to any questions prior to that.
Thank you, John. Again, I invite the board to use the raised hand feature if they have any questions or comments, and we'll begin with Crystal Brackey.
Me again. I just wanted to acknowledge that the family and community involvement is one of the things that I have historically raised as a concern in this. So just wanted to appreciate the progress that is being made on this front. So special thanks to you, Tanya, and to the other people who are involved in making that happen, even in what I know has been a challenging year to be able to pull things like that off. So thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. Are there additional questions or comments? So at this time, we'll move forward with action. Is there a motion to approve the report? Oh, excuse me. Yes. Who is it who asked for?
Sam Sant. I thought I put my hand up in board book. I'm not sure.
I don't see it, but I'm glad you spoke up. So Sam, go ahead.
Thank you. You had mentioned about children being behind, because of this pandemic. We've talked about it in Robbinsdale as well. And are you guys considering anything as far as extending the school year for this year or lengthening it for next school year to try to help those kids that are furthest behind get ahead?
Elizabeth?
I think we're looking at many options, and certainly the most available one in terms of seamless, not changing the actual school calendar, is to really look at that extended school year that we offer every summer. And so we began to explore how might that look and what can we do differently. That's historically been about 3 weeks. We know that's, I'm going to say it, that's not going to be sufficient for the needs of our students. So we're looking at how we can leverage that, and certainly looking at a lot of opportunities beyond the summer and what that school year looks like. But excellent point.
Thank you. Are there additional questions or comments before we move for action? All right, is there a motion to approve the World's Best Workforce Report as presented?
So moved.
Sure. Oh, second.
And who is the first person who spoke?
Heather Douglas.
Thank you. So moved by
Steve
Heather,
Adams, second.
seconded by Steve. Thank you. And just a note that what I'm experiencing, which I'm not sure if this is universal, I'm experiencing many frozen videos, but not consistently. So it's making it a little difficult for me to sometimes pin a voice immediately. So thanks for your patience with that. And we'll just speak up, because I want to make sure that everybody has that chance to be heard. So we do have a motion by Heather Douglas and a second by Steve Adams. Crystal, could you please call the roll?
Adams.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keen.
Yes.
Dallas. Ruthie, are you there?
Her screen looks like it might be frozen on my side.
Yeah, I was just noticing that too. I'll come back at the end and see if we get her back. Douglas.
Aye.
Kuntz.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Neville.
Aye.
Sam.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
And we'll try Dallas again.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you all. And thank you, John, to you and to your team. Next is item 8, Business Services and Labor Relations Report. We'll begin with 8.2.1, the financial report and the unaudited financial report for fiscal year 2020. I'd like to welcome Gloria Wilder. Gloria, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Neville and School Board. Thank you for having me. I'm going to be presenting the FY 1920 unaudited financial report tonight. And I am going to share my screen so that you can see my presentation, hopefully. Okay, so we will be presenting the unaudited financials, but Jim Eichten, the partner from MMKR, will be coming January 14th and give you the full audit report, as well as he will be meeting with a couple of the board officers next week and Sandy to review the full audit report. In your packet, you have this full spreadsheet, and I'm not going to go through all the numbers on this spreadsheet, but I want to hit some of the key items tonight for your review. Our general fund, unassigned in District 287, is on the top portion, and we divide our general fund up into the three instructional areas and the operational area. And then the next part of the general fund is the assigned area, where we reserve a few grants and different funding that we want to keep separate from the other areas so that we can track them easily. And then we have the restricted area, and that is the area that is restricted by law or required us to keep our records separate for. So in the full general fund, those three areas, we've seen in FY20, the revenues were down 1.23% and the expenditures were down 5%. This down in the expenditures was a little more than we normally are from budget, and primarily due to the COVID-related pandemic that started in the spring and the resulting us shutting down and having a distance learning model in the spring. For the non-major funds consist of food service, construction, debt service, trust and scholarship fund, and our internal services funds. Our revenues were down from budget at 1.94%, and our expenditures 14.41%. That drop was mainly due to the areas I have on this slide. Food service, in the spring of the year, we were not serving student meals. Trust fund, we had our flex account in that, our employee flex account. And there was a change in government accounting standards board, the GASB standards, that required us to change that. They no longer wanted that into a trust fund. So we had to move that to general fund. And part of that standard change is requiring us to account for it a little different. We account for it as a liability instead of revenues and expenditures. So taking that out of the mix and putting it into liability reduced our revenues and expenditures for the non-major funds area. And then we saw our internal service funds. So this is our health and our dental. If you remember back in the spring of the year when the governor had a shutdown, they also shut down or closed medical procedures for all non-essential services. We really saw that big change in our internal service fund because staff weren't able to get in and have those appointments. So our expenditures came in way lower than we anticipated from budget because of that reason. So some of the areas that we do transfers, fund balance transfers, is severance. We account for that in the assigned area, and we transfer in revenue to cover in the current and future severance costs. And then food service. Food service is an area that because of the size of our buildings with the number of students in there, we're not able to get that economy of scales. So we always plan for a revenue transfer from the general fund to food service. This year, it came in lower than budgeted. And one of the primary reasons it did come in lower is that in the spring of the year, when we went to a distant learning model, the staff that were in food service were repurposed, and they were used to provide additional cleaning and sanitizing. And so because of that, we could not claim them in food service any longer. So we had to move their salaries into Fund 1. So that's why we saw the drop in the transfer there. So additions to the assigned fund balance area, we have the property account, and we added $56,533 in that area. And this was due to projects that could not be completed before June 30th, and that they will be completed in FY21. The transportation and vehicle depreciation, we transfer every year based on the depreciation of our current vehicles, that depreciation into a separate assigned fund balance so that we can accumulate that and use that for replacement vehicles as needed. And that way we do not have to charge member districts for those vehicle purchases or claim for additional revenue. The next area is the subsequent year budget, and this is a counting standard also. The GASB requires a district to set aside funds that if your budget planning for the following year includes expenditures excess of revenues, you have to set aside those funds so that you know that you have them to cover that shortfall. So that's where those funds are added to. And so that balance in that subsequent year that followed our original budget is $839,696. So the strategic priorities is the next area. We did add additional $450,000 there to support our mental health initiatives, our TTM pilot, and the services from Wilder Foundation. We added $500,000 to a new assigned fund balance area called COVID-19 additional expenses. And we added that because we know that FY21, we were seeing the trend, of course, is that we will have more expenses to cover COVID-19 related expenses than we will receive funding for. And then we had a couple of small areas, donations for a specified purpose. There was another accounting standard change. We have our scholarship fund, Fund 10, that is in our non-major funds area. That scholarship fund used to be crosswalked to a trust account. The standard change was there is now what's called a custodial fund, and scholarships are eligible for that, and the majority is staying in that non-major fund of scholarships. But there was a couple things in that fund that did not qualify under the new guidance of the custodial fund, and those were moved out. Those were under the Give Minnesota for food service accounts. And so that was moved up to Fund 1 assigned. And then that flex account entry that I talked about earlier, we moved the beginning balance up to Fund 1. And that is also on your board cover today to approve. That is something that came up late in the audit process. So we usually bring the transfers to the November board meeting for your approval. if it's changing funds, and that one was later, came up later during our auditing process. So we added that on the board agenda tonight to approve. So recapping our fund balance, our total unassigned fund balance is 9.77% of general fund expenses. And that is up slightly from last year. Last year was at 9.21%, and a little bit up from budget, revised budget also, where we were forecasting it at 9.1%. The assigned fund balances showed a growth, and that was mainly because of the slide before, those additions added to the assigned fund balance areas. The restricted fund balance areas, they are stable. We do know for FY21 that we will have a greater impact to those restricted fund areas, especially for medical assistance, because of our funding, our learning model this year being the connected learning or the hybrid. We're not as much in person and don't have those encounters. So we know our revenue will be going down in medical assistance. So it's good that we have the fund balance to rely on for this school year. And then our debt service fund will continue to grow as on schedule to pay off the sinking fund at the North Education Center building. The construction fund, we are anticipating using up those funds this year for the remainder of the ABEC renovations. And then our health insurance reserve, as I touched on before, that did grow. We expected it to grow, but it grew a little more with the pandemic of last year. So what's ahead? FY21 revised budget we'll be bringing to the board in February. This revised budget will reflect more the current enrollment trends for FY21. We know that this pandemic has affected our enrollment numbers. So we will be adjusting to what we're seeing currently and adjust the revenues and expenditures to the report we bring to the board in February. We also that revised budget will also include the additional COVID-related expenses and the different funding areas that we've received. So not last, but not least, I should say, I'd like to give a special thanks to the finance department. The work they do all year to make sure our financial records are accurate and that the district is meeting internal controls helps us always have a successful audit. And a special shout out to Phyllis Vitt and David Anderson, who are instrumental in coordinating and putting things together for our audit. So with that given said, I can stop sharing my screen now and would love to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Gloria. And I will echo that shout out to your team and to Phyllis and David. Thank you. The work is appreciated. Surprised that this is such an unusual year and requires a lot of flexibility with response, with staying on target and adapting to not only GASB changes, but all of the necessary changes that the pandemic has required. So thank you. Are there any questions or comments for the financial report, for the unaudited report? Steve, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair Neville. Gloria, our district just completed its audit and presented the the audited report to the board for approval. And you say you're not starting your audit until January. Are there different rules for intermediates? We had to have ours done by the end of this fiscal or this calendar year.
Yeah.
What's the
We didn't, we're not starting the audit in January. Jim is completing or bringing the final audit report in January.
okay?
But because of that, we also have to have our financials in by December 31st. Our cycle is a little bit later, so we always bring the unaudited version, and we call it unaudited, even though we've gone through our audited, because until the auditors present the audited version, it's considered unaudited. So they will meet with the board officers and Sandy next week to give a full recap of the report and their approval so that we can submit our financials by the December 31st deadline. And then we present it in January. Our cycle is a little bit later than probably most of your districts, being independent districts, because we have to get through all the final year end, and then because we do the massive billing at the end of everything closing out and get that recorded and put onto our books, we're a little bit later in the cycle, but we still meet our statutory requirements.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? This is an action item this evening, so hearing no additional questions or comments, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the unaudited financial report for fiscal year 2020 as presented.
Andrea King.
I'll second Sam
Moved
Sant.
by Andrea, seconded by Sam Sant. I invite board members to please unmute in preparation for the roll call vote. And Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Adams.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keen.
Yes.
Gallus.
Yes.
Douglas.
Yes.
Kuntz.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Neville.
Aye.
Sant.
Yes.
Seidel.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. And again, Gloria, thank you to you and your team. That is much appreciated work.
Thank you.
Next is our Human Resources Report. I'd like to welcome Michelle Axel to give us a classification and compensation study recommendation for action. We've had a couple of reports on the Gallagher report. And Michelle, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Novo and members of the board. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Oh, thank you. And Ann Becker and I will be presenting as a team together tonight. And thank you for this opportunity. Thank you to Juanine. She's presenting on our behalf, so appreciate that. Slide 1, which is where we're at right now, is this afternoon or this evening, our goal is to help you understand the work completed as part of the study and the analysis performed that has resulted in the recommendations for approval tonight. By the end of this presentation, we hope that you'll have an understanding of the reasons for a study of the administrative and unaffiliated employees' pay plan. We hope that you'll have an understanding of the objectives and resulting outcomes from the study for board approval. Next slide, please. I'm just going to talk briefly on the reasons why behind performing a comprehensive review of the administrator and unaffiliated pay plan at this time. First, it is best practice. In order to remain competitive, it is best practice to conduct a comprehensive market compensation study similar to the the salary study that was just completed as part of this project at least every 3 to 5 years. A regular review of the classification and compensation system is an exercise to help retain and attract talent. Last time, there was a comprehensive review of the administrator and unaffiliated pay plan was back in 2010, 10 years ago. At that time, the review was conducted primarily in-house, largely without the benefit of a consultant who specializes in such studies. Last fall, we discovered that our principals were paid much less than principals in our member districts. With the board's approval, we right-sized principal salaries in January and again in July of 2020. It was at that time the board agreed and recognized the importance of a complete pay plan review of the positions. December of last year, we retained Gallagher Benefit Services, which we often refer to as GBS, to conduct the comprehensive classification and compensation study for unaffiliated and administrator positions. Next slide, please. So the first step in the study was to develop an updated position classification structure. GBS developed a position description questionnaire, a PDQ, in order to collect job information from employees on their essential responsibilities, decision-making examples, the knowledge and the skills for their positions. Every employee had the right to complete an individual PDQ. Approximately 68 PDQs were completed by this employee group. GBS said this was a high PDQ completion rate of over 90%. GBS shared that through this process, we are including employees and getting their involvement, as well as ensuring that GBS had the most accurate, up-to-date information by using this PDQ process. After the PDQs were completed by employees, they were reviewed by supervisors and executive leadership, and ultimately they were funneled through HR and submitted to Gallagher. Using information gained from the PDQ, as well as on-site interviews and organizational charts, GBS developed a classification structure organized by job, career, families. The classification process, with different job family series and different levels of work within it, provides for greater consistency across the district with regards to levels of jobs that exist and also the job titling conventions that exist. The classification structure put together provides an objective and consistent framework for organizing jobs within the district. The framework organizes jobs based on the body of work and the distinguishable level of work. A job family series provides an infrastructure for jobs and establishes a consistent language to describe work, responsibilities, and roles at varying levels across the district. Next slide, please. So the next step in the study was to look at internal equity and classify district jobs using a formal evaluation method. The decision band method, or DBM, is a formal job evaluation method applied to each individual classification level within the new classification structure. It defines internal equity and job value hierarchy. The reason GBS looks at internal equity is to ensure that we are looking at all the jobs in relationship to each other within the district, and for those internal job value hierarchy relationships as well. It also helps with assigning jobs to a pay grade. And on an ongoing basis, it provides an objective context, framework, and methodology for evaluating new jobs. The premise of the DBS, or the decision band method, is tied to decisions. The value of a job should reflect the importance of the job to the organization, and the importance of a job is directly related to the decision-making requirements of the job. Ultimately, decision-making can be measured and is common to all jobs. While jobs will make decisions at different levels, all jobs are required to make some level of decisions. And that's the premise behind the decision band method. DBM starts at a common point for all jobs to get them into an appropriate level and then delineates from there. This method requires significant research about existing district positions to establish their relative decision-making authority within the organization, their supervisory responsibilities, and the level of complexity and difficulty of their work. This method helps achieve a pay structure that is gender, race neutral, given its basis is tied to decisions. It also helps achieve a consistent, ongoing implementation and maintenance of the structure. The administration has closely vetted the decision band method and recommends adoption of this method as its new job evaluation and classification system. Next slide, please. And I'm going to pass the baton and welcome Ann Becker.
Thank you, Michelle, for a great overview of the classification study. I'm now going to talk about the compensation study. In order to do the compensation study, GBS collected market data. And to do this, they identified 31 benchmark positions. And the way they arrived at those benchmark positions was that they wanted to represent at least 50% of the employee group. In this case, the 31 benchmark positions represent 69% of the group. They wanted to capture those positions that represented all pay levels, all decision band method levels, all functional areas of the district, and also those positions that are either difficult to recruit or experience high turnover. The salary information was gathered from the local market, primarily member districts. There were 16 organizations that were invited to participate in the study, and GBS was able to collect data from 14 of those 16, or 88%. And the fact that they were able to collect 88% of that data means that they have a robust representation of the market in order to build the salary structure from. In terms of the published salary sources that they used from the full market, GBS adjusted the data by geographical location, taking into account different labor rates, and also adjusted the date of the data to have a common date of July 15, 2020. Next slide, please. This slide shows the findings of that salary survey. In sum, the comparison showed that the district average actual salaries and salary ranges were competitive in some instances and highly competitive in others, as you can see there at the top. Overall, the district salary ranges were competitive with the full market and highly competitive with the custom salary information, the custom survey group. The next objective was to use this market data to build a new salary structure with competitive minimums, midpoints, and maximums on the salary ranges. This would, over 80% of public and private organizations target their salary ranges at 50%, the 50th percentile of the market. Therefore, that's where GBS placed the midpoint of our salary ranges, was at the 50th percentile. They placed the minimums at the 25th percentile of the market and the maximums at the 75th percentile. This will ensure that district salaries and salary ranges neither lead nor lag those of the member districts. And the recommendation is that the board approve the proposed salary structure. Next slide, please. GBS recommended 3 different options to bring individual salaries into alignment with the new salary structure. The first option was to bring 3 individuals to the minimum of their salary range, and that would cost $10,801. The second option would place 16 employees at the midpoint of their respective ranges, which would require $131,833. The third option would bring 23 employees to the step where they belong in their respective salary range, and that would cost $214,063. We would have liked to go with that last option and place everybody in the step where they belong in the salary range, but that would not be respectful of our current economic situation. So we took a more conservative approach. We recommend providing increases to 19 of the 23 people identified by GBS and capping increases at $5,000. So that's 19 of the 23 people. What's happening with the other 4 would be the question. And the other 4 belong to the executive leadership team, made up of executive directors and the assistant superintendent. And if we had provided the increases that Gallagher was recommending, we probably would have put those salaries out of whack with member district salaries for similar positions. So we left those 4 positions out. The cost to provide increases of no more than $5,000 each to 19 people is $58,848, or 0.7% of the total payroll for this group. This would bring 13 of the 19 individuals to the appropriate step in the salary range, and the remaining 6 would make significant progress toward the appropriate step. The increases would be retroactive to July 1, 2020, when the study was originally supposed to be done. Next slide, please. So we don't intend to let another 10 years go by until we again analyze the positions that were analyzed in this study, even though the HR department has clearly done a great job of staying competitive with the market over that time. Best practice, as Michelle said, is to do this kind of study every 3 to 5 years, and that is what GBS is recommending. In order to maintain internal equity and external competitiveness in the meantime, GBS has recommended several steps, and you can see them on this slide. Our recommendation is that the board approve a cost of living adjustment to the new salary structure effective July 1, 2021, and every year thereafter. Next slide, please. Michelle and I will be happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any questions or comments? This is an action item this evening.
Chair Neville, I have a question.
Thank you. We're going to start with Crystal Brackey as one raised hand, and then Sam, we will follow with yours. So Crystal, go ahead, please.
Sam can go ahead. That would be great.
Okay, Sam.
Thank you, Crystal. Just a quick question on going back a few of the slides. There were you showed the mid-range points at the 50% and where the district should be, and there was some percentage of how much below. There's one I was confused about because it said the average was 1.8% below but then the bottom is like less than 5.5% below that. So that was kind of confusing. Could you explain that again or show that back on the screen for a better clarification?
Sure, that first figure reflects average actual salaries. And the second figure was referring to the salary ranges themselves, if I remember correctly. Here it is. Thanks, Winnie. Just back one. There it is. So the average actual salaries are 1.8% below the 50th percentile. But in terms of the salary ranges themselves, they're competitive at the minimum, highly competitive at the midpoint, and highly competitive at the maximum.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Sam. Crystal.
Is there anybody else that had questions? I feel like I would love for other people to go first, given that I've already been asking a fair amount.
Well, you're asking good questions, so I appreciate learning. Why don't you go ahead? And if there is no other raised hand right now, but this will give an opportunity for other people to consider anything else we may need to add.
Fantastic. So I have two. I'll share them both. So the first, I think I just don't understand the methodology and how we can say that it is gender and race neutral. So if there is more that can be shared about how that is determined and how we can say with confidence that something is gender or race neutral, which I feel like is actually very difficult to do, that would be helpful. And then the second thing is just around doing the increases retroactively. And I understand the rationale is because that's when the study was intended to be done. But my question is whether or not we have any past practice or concern about setting precedent around retroactively increasing salaries.
I can take the second question and Michelle can tackle the first. The idea of the retroactivity, it's something that we commonly do in contracts that are settled after the expiration date. We provide retroactive payments back to July 1 of the year in which the contract was supposed to be settled. So that's our precedent for this.
I'm just wondering if I could clarify that question a little bit, because I was wondering the same thing. This study, though, isn't part of a contract, right?
It's the unaffiliated employees and administrators have an employment guide rather than a contract, but it's the same idea. It provides the terms and conditions of their employment.
Okay, I have another question, but I don't want to go out of turn.
Well, thank you. So why, if we can, or is it on this same topic as this first part one of Crystal's question? And then the part two is more background on race and equity.
It is kind of on the same topic as Crystal's question.
So would it be all right if we bring Heather's into this? And that way we can address as all of it. And am I correct in seeing, Andrea, do you have a raised hand?
Yes.
I'm finding raised hands on Google and Board Book Premier. So this is kind of exciting. It's two places, but this is okay. So thank you. So we'll Heather, go ahead and ask your question and we'll address that category of question. Then we'll move to Michelle's response of the part two of Crystal's question regarding race and equity. And then we'll move to Andrea. So Heather, go ahead.
Thank you. So throughout my time here on 287's board, I feel like even though this is obviously new study information that we have, I feel like there's been several circumstances where we've said, oh, we need to, significantly increase someone's salary to make so that we're not leading or lagging, and so that we're kind of more in the midpoint. And I guess I'm kind of wondering why is that has come up so many times, and after this study has been done, will that now make all of our groups kind of in the mid range and everybody kind of on an even playing field, or is there still more to do on that?
The reason that has come up so often is because it's been 10 years since we did a comprehensive look at the pay plan. And so we've continually had to play catch up once we have discovered that salaries were out of whack. With this comprehensive salary study and placing most individuals on the step that they should be in the salary range, we should be set for until the next study in 3 to 5 years.
Thanks, Heather. And Crystal, has the first part of your question been addressed well? Do you have the information? Not yet.
I'm sorry, the part about the retroactivity has, the part about.
Yes.
Okay, then yes.
Yeah, that one's good to go. Thank you. Thanks, Anne. And Michelle, could you please address part 2 of Crystal's question regarding additional background on how the gender and race neutral determination is made?
So Gallagher would argue that the decision band method focuses on position and the decision-making authority of a position itself. And so with that being said, the DBM is made up of 3. First is based on where does this position, not individual, lie in terms of their decision making authority within a district, so, or an organization. So for example, your highest level would be policy or programming, making those, that would be a level in which the superintendent is making the highest authority and decisions that have a value, not only in the impact of the business, but also in terms of the budgeting of the business, all the way down to actions that are just directed. There's no thought right to it. You're given a task and you do this task. So that would be part of their argument. The other, or reasoning, maybe is a better word than argument. The other is then it's also relative to, is this position one that supervises, or is it a non-supervisory position? So again, focused on the position and focused on the hierarchy of the decision-making and value within an organization or district. It also then looks at the difficulty related to the tasks that are assigned to this position. So that would be why Gallagher and the decision band method would give that reasoning that they're not looking at person, they're looking at a position, and every position in the organization is looked at in an objective and similar format. So they won't look at a specific type of position any different. And at the same is they level it. So they create job families, and then they do that internal equity amongst the different families. And the whole time in this internal equity and comparison of positions is they're looking at that decision-making level, that supervisory level, the difficulty of your tasks level. So it's across that whole organization. So a placement of a job classification within one department will look at across every department with that same relative review.
Thanks for the answer. I'll just respond and say it's a tough thing for me to believe, maybe is the only word that I can say. I think because we are still human beings operating in the system, because it's still human beings making the decisions about who is in the different positions. And we know we have existing disparities that this does not address or solve for. So I think that's where some of my skepticism comes in, and why the claim that it is race and gender neutral especially jumped out at me.
So what I hear you saying, Crystal, is the position, maybe all these positions are set up, but it's humans who are making the decision as to who's placed in those positions. Did I articulate that correctly?
Yes.
Thank you. That's helpful. And that also gives a charge, right? A charge in a district that is focused on race equity, right? And trying to disrupt systems and disrupt our unconscious biases. Thank you.
And thank you both. Andrea, your question or comment?
Yeah, thank you. I was just reading over today the document that you prepared, what the board needs to know about the classification and compensation study from November 6th, which I thought was really helpful. I think I clicked on it in the minutes from the last meeting. And I liked how it was explained, and how when you described how it might be implemented, there were those 3 categories of bring to the minimum of the salary range, bring to the midpoint of the salary range, or bring to the maximum of the salary range. My question is, if you could just, given that context, kind of explain to me a little bit about how the recommendation this evening fits into those 3 options, because it seems like it's a little bit different than what was presented as the possible option. I'm guessing it must be kind of a combination, or does the cost of living adjustment change those numbers?
So as you say, it is a combination.
Okay.
It brings, so I explained why there were 19 of the 23 positions were chosen for increases. So we know why the 4 were left out. And then of the 19, it brings 13 of those 19 to the step on the salary range where they should be, which may be the midpoint, maybe halfway to the maximum. It could vary for individuals in terms of length of time in the position. And then the remaining 6, it takes them much closer to where they should be on the salary schedule. But because we capped the increases at 5,000, it means that some of them don't make it to the actual step where they quote unquote should be.
I understand. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I recognize Sam has a question or comment. I would like to ask just a follow-up to Andrea's question, which is one that I had in the case where the $5,000 cap only brings some of the employees partially to where we are hoping they would be. Is there a plan moving forward to make up some of the rest of that difference over time in the future?
That would be ideal. Given our current economic circumstances and the uncertainty about the future, we really haven't gotten that far. Obviously, we would like to get there, but at this point, I don't know if that's going to be possible.
And I understand. Thank you. Sam, your question or comment?
Now, the 19 classifications that you're asking us to approve tonight, are these all, or how do I want to say this? Are these all the recommendations you have for these classifications? And is there anybody else in a similar classification or the same classification that's being left out in our district?
No, the 19 are individuals in a bunch of different job classifications, and the individuals were singled out in order to bring them to the appropriate step in the salary schedule. So we haven't left anybody out that Gallagher suggested have increases, except for the executive leadership team, for the reason I mentioned, that it would put the salaries for those individuals likely out of whack with the member district salaries for similar positions. Does that answer your question, Sam?
It does, yes. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Are there any additional questions or comments? And again, this is an action item. The summary of the recommendations to the board is a part of the board packet, and it's page 69. There are 4 recommendations resulting from the Gallagher study, and we've had the detail presented this evening. So at this time, if there
Chair
are no
Neville,
additional questions.
Sorry, I had something quick that just popped up. On the
Please do.
6 of the 6 who are making progress to the appropriate step, is there anything? Are they? I guess is that a group that's more similar to like the executive leadership group, where that in order to make enough progress, I guess it was too expensive, or they were they further below the range? Do you get what I'm asking? Is there anything about that group that we should be sort of mindful of right now?
They really occupy positions all over the map. There's no commonality to them. I can tell you that our current recommendation is costs $58,000, I think $848. The recommendation that would be required if we brought everybody to the appropriate step, that would cost $105,458. And that's why we capped increases at 5,000, was to keep the package affordable.
So that's another, what, 45,000 represented by just those 6 individuals.
Right.
Okay. Thanks, that's helpful.
And thank you. I just, before the vote, I'd just like to mention that I appreciate asking these questions about salary with all of our employee groups on a regular basis. And in my time at 287, I have heard that to be the case. I think it's always important to reflect on whether we are leading or lagging, and to reflect on job descriptions and making sure that they are updated as needed, because all of this moves. Things move within our district, and there is also movement in the member districts around us. So it is something that we'll continue to do. I appreciate the fact that the district has engaged in the Gallagher study, because it gives us something external and hopefully somewhat more objective than our own internal questioning. But I appreciate the fact that we can continue, now that we have this as a framework, we can continue to use it, add the gender equity in addition to this, and hopefully continue to refine the methodology that we use to make sure that it's the best of what we can do. So thank you. And I appreciate the ongoing questions. Any final questions or comments before we make the motion and approve all of the recommendations for the Gallagher report? Hearing none, is there a motion to
Chair Neville,
yes.
I have a question.
Sorry, I know it's a little lagging.
Okay, I'm hearing Sam and one other. Who
Hi.
is the second individual? I apologize, I'm not able to.
Heather Douglas. I think.
Oh, thank you, Heather. Go ahead.
There's like a lag or something. I'm not sure, but can you hear me? Okay.
I'm hearing a lag as well. Yeah, I'd say just keep talking and it will catch up. It should come into. It'll be fine.
Okay. So a concern that I have is obviously we need to be fiscally responsible. We can't make decisions here that we aren't capable of sustaining. But I also am concerned about prolonging bringing our employees up to the level that they should be at, so that we're neither lagging or leading. And it sounds like in this case it would be lagging. And I'm wondering if we have a plan in place, or if we can develop a plan to make sure that we can sooner than later bring those employees to where they need to be, and kind of eliminate this need to continually have this conversation of bringing people up. I feel like that's a trend that we've had, and while I'm glad that we've been doing that, it feels like you know, the work that we do in this district is so important, and there's a continuous emphasis that there's burnout, a lot more burnout when you're working with kids who have significant needs, which all of our employees do. And so I just am wondering if there's a way that we can implement a way to have this conversation and not have to be always having this conversation, because we're always kind of a couple of steps ahead. We know this is coming, and do you know what I'm saying?
I would like to invite Superintendent Lewandowski to address the concerns that you're articulating. Thanks, Heather. Sandy?
Heather, thanks for raising that. It was a dilemma for some of us as well. And in fact, I should state that we kept the final decisions really very close to me and just a couple of other key people, so that there was no conflict of interest. And even with that, it was hard to kind of sort all this out. This was a major endeavor to try to get to this point. You raise an excellent suggestion, I think, and we'd be happy to take that back and study it, and maybe later in the year bring back a recommendation to that question. Would that be all right? Okay.
Thank you. And Sam, did you have a question? And I see that Andrea also has a raised hand, but Sam, did you have something?
No, I was just trying to get your attention when Heather was for her. That's all.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm just trying to navigate the lag that I see a little bit. All right, thank you. And thank you, Sandy. So with that, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the classification and compensation study as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Sam Sant. Is there a second?
Second, Heather Douglas.
Seconded by Heather Douglas. Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Adams.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keen.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Douglas.
Yes.
Kuhn.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Neville.
Aye.
Vance.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Thank you all. Motion carries. And again, thanks to everyone for their hard work on this study. I appreciate how this has really advanced the district's work to be able to better classify and review compensation. Next up on the agenda is item 9, board business. We'll begin with policy review and revision, and I'd like to welcome Ann Becker back again to address the Title IX policy and some updates. So this is a first read, not an action item. So Ann, go ahead.
So just as a reminder, this replaces the emergency policy, or this is proposed to replace the emergency policy that you passed in July, so that we could meet the August 14th deadline for having a Title IX policy. And as you can see, it's much longer. And I'd say it's much better. It's probably, well, I'm sure it's not perfect, but it is quite possible that the new Title IX regulations will not be long for this world anyway. So I would say it does a great job for right now.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, well, we have the full text available in the packet, so thanks for the update. Next is our board chair report. And at this time of year, we always convene a nominating committee to prepare a slate of officers for District 287. Generally, this meeting of the nominating committee meetings, plural, will take place after the first of the year, when we know which board members will be reappointed in the case of any positions that need reappointment by their member districts. And the goal is to present a slate of officers to the board for approval at the January 14th meeting of 2021. So I'd like to recommend that our executive committee form the nominating committee, which is how we have done this in most years. That consists of Andrea Keene, Crystal Brackey, Heather Douglas, and myself. But in order to stay below quorum, we do still have a slot for an additional position if anyone else would like to participate in this process. So I would invite anyone to come forward now who would like to join the nominating committee process. I'm not seeing waving hands or jumping up. Michelle, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take the spot if that's available. So
there is one.
If
Yes.
you need me, I would gladly be part of the committee. I've done this before, so not.
You do have good experience. Thank you. So are there, and I want to just also add to this that I invite all of the board to consider a leadership position. There are, both qualities that we want to balance. There is value in having consistency and stable leadership. There's also value in turning over positions so that we have some fresh perspectives in our leadership positions. So I invite everyone to consider what could be a good match for them in the year ahead. And the nominating committee, what we will generally do is send out an email. Juanine will have that communication early in the year so that people have an opportunity to express an interest if they so desire. So at this point, I'd like to propose a slate for the nominating committee to include members Andrea Keene, Crystal Brackey, Heather Douglas, Michelle Kuntz, and myself, Regina Neville. Are there any other additional considerations for the nominating committee? Is there a motion to accept the proposal?
So moved.
So moved.
Adam.
Second, Casey.
Moved by Steve Adams, seconded by Ann Casey. I would invite all board members to unmute their mics for the roll call vote. Crystal, go ahead, please.
Adam.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keene.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Douglas.
Aye.
Kuntz.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Neville.
Aye.
Sam.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. So, and I'd like to thank the members who are joining the nominating committee for your willingness to participate. So stay tuned. We will have more information close to the end of this calendar year so that we can move forward with preparing a slate of officers for recommendation at the January 14th meeting. Next up, AMSD report. So again, thank you to our representatives from 287. Who is going to give an AMSD update this evening? Ann Casey, thank you. Ann, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Neville. AMSD met last Friday for its December meeting, and of note, we had a couple of guest speakers, including two of the incoming state senators, including Senator-elect Ann Johnson Stewart, who represents, I looked it up earlier today, I think five of our member districts, including Hopkins, Osseo, Robbinsdale, and Wayzata, and 6 people in St. Louis Park. I learned that today. I always thought we only had 10 in District 46. So I learned something new today when I looked that up. So it was great to hear from Senator-elect Johnson Stewart, and looking forward to, I know, working with her in District 287. And there were also, I would encourage everyone to look at the AMSD website at a few different things as we approach the new session. There are a bunch of updated position papers, including compensatory revenue, early childhood, English learner funding, facilities, school board, the perennial school board renewal of an operating referendum, and special education. There's also the platform is out, and that is also available on the AMSD website, so check that out. And we also had some small group breakouts. I thought mine was excellent, reviewing there's a draft of a session brief on the proposed constitutional amendment. So be looking for more on that to come in the coming weeks and months. And mark your calendars. This is for everyone, not just the AMSD board members, but the session preview for AMSD is going to be held virtually. So easy to do it from your couch, even though it's early in the morning, 8 a.m. on Friday, January 8th. And the guests, I know that the Governor Walz has been invited, that Commissioner Ricker is confirmed, and then also Representative Portman, Representative Kresha, Senator Gazelka, and Senator Kent will be there for the legislative preview. And that is like the meeting to go to if you go to one AMSD meeting a year. It's always very, very interesting and a good preview for what's to come. So that is again on the 8th, January 8th. At 8 a.m.
Thank you, Anne. And the information to join the meeting is on the AMSD website, correct?
It will be. The Zoom is probably not up yet, but it will be. Yeah.
Thank you. Michelle, you have a question?
Well, that was my question that you just said. I was wondering how we if we had to register or whatever. And
I don't think so. If it's getting close and you don't know, ask whoever your AMSD rep for your district or me. I can send it to you.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And thanks, Anne, for the presentation and update. Just want to clarify a calendar issue. We have a calendar question. Local 2209 board breakfast on December 15th. Is that still happening virtually? It is. Great. And then, so I would encourage anyone interested in going to RSVP to Juanine, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Excellent. So just a reminder that those are always good opportunities. And again, 7 a.m. is not so bad when you don't have a commute. You just get up and go to that virtual meeting. Anne, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify one thing. I had said that the policy does a great job. I wanted you to know that it's primarily the MSBA policy, not my work. So I was not trying to applaud my own work.
We'll applaud your work. I think it's still warranted. So I've read a lot of MSBA policy and it is always a good start. And I've also always known that each district needs to consider it independently and go from there. So thank you very much. But thank you for that. So at this point, once around the table, where I think everyone is looking forward to winter break and hoping that it is indeed a break and an opportunity to refresh and have a little bit of downtime, anything that anyone would like to share from their home districts or in reference specifically to 287. Michelle.
Yes, thank you, Chair Neville. News from Orono, Dr. Orcutt turned in her resignation after 17 years as a superintendent at Orono and many, many years of work with Orono before then. That was announced at the Monday night board meeting, and they have selected her successor, who is quote unquote homegrown, Dr. Christy Flesher. So things will be very interesting to see what changes are made, if any, and also, of course, how Orono and 287 fit together, if there are changes there. I wanted to just publicly say how much I've enjoyed having Dr. Orcutt as superintendent. I served 10 years along with being on this board. So, and when she came on, and yeah, anyway, they've taken the step of not having to hire or go searching outside too far. And yeah, anyway, so.
Thanks, Michelle. That is a big update. Additional comments to share?
Chair Neville. First of all, I've got a
Yes.
question for Director Coons. Is that resignation effective immediately?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I should have said end of the school year, so June 30th. And Christy will start in her new position July 1st.
Okay,
Yeah,
and that's
sorry.
a permanent hire. It's not a interim.
Oh, no, permanent.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, we've got another issue in Hopkins with an empty seat. Our vice chair, Chris Latondras, was elected to be commissioner, Hennepin County Commissioner for our district.
Oh.
And that leaves an open seat. So we put out a call for people to who might be interested to respond. And we weren't sure if we'd get 2 or 3 or 5 or, well, we got 17 applicants. So we're going to be doing a lot of interviewing over the coming 2 weeks. So, and I've seen the list. I didn't recognize most of the names. So that would be, that'll be interesting. So we're going to be interviewing people to fill this seat through the end of 2021. So they get to test drive it and decide whether or not they want to run for re-election in the fall. So that'll be interesting.
Oh, well, we wish you well. And please keep
Thank
us
you.
posted.
Yeah,
That's quite
I
a
will.
process.
Yeah.
Best of luck. Anything else? All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for an extraordinary year of work. I mean, truly an extraordinary year. And we're coming to the end of the calendar year. I hope that in another year's time, that it will be very different circumstances and more of what we're used to in education and moving forward. But thanks to all of you for your work. I extend this to those here present on this virtual meeting, but also all of our staff, our families, our students. Thank you for making 287 what it is, for being so strong, for being flexible and adaptable. And I wish you all the best for the upcoming winter break and look forward to continuing to work with everybody in January. So with that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Adam.
Moved by
Second,
Steve Adams.
Heather Douglas.
Seconded by Heather Douglas. And Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Adams.
Aye.
Brackey is an I. Casey.
Aye.
Keen.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Douglas.
Aye.
Coons.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Neville.
Aye.
Sant.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Motion carries. And with that, we are adjourned. Have a great evening, everyone.
Yeah, great holidays, everyone.
Thank
Happy holidays,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
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 Thanks.